The galaxy had 1,000 ways to kill a man, and Garrett Vance had personally survived most of them. He sat in the battered pilot's chair of the Pale Fortune, boots up on the console, a half-empty bottle of Callaway Station whiskey balanced on his knee. Outside the forward viewport, the Vareth way station turned slow and ugly against the stars. It looked like a rusted jawbone someone had welded into orbit and forgotten about, all crooked docking pylons and peeling hull plating. The kind of place where nobody asked questions because nobody wanted the answers. Garrett had been waiting 40 minutes for a contact who was already 20 minutes late, which meant the contact was either nervous, greedy, or dead. 2 out of 3 made this job complicated. All 3 made it interesting. "You are drumming your fingers on the console again," said Arya, the ship's navigation and operations AI. Her voice was dry and precise, like a professor who had given up on tenure. "Building suspense," Garrett said. "You have been building suspense for 40 minutes. At this rate, I expect the suspense to collapse under its own weight." Garrett took a pull of whiskey. "You know what your problem is. No appreciation for atmosphere." "My current atmospheric reading is nominal," Arya said. "Cabin pressure is stable. Humidity is borderline unpleasant." "I assume you mean something else." "I meant the dramatic kind." "Ah," a pause. "Shall I recalculate your survival probability for this mission?" "That might create drama." Garrett pointed at the control panel. "Don't!" Arya went quiet. She had this habit of going quiet in a way that still managed to sound judgmental, like a sigh compressed into silence. Garrett had bought the ship used, and she had come with it, preloaded and opinionated. He had spent 2 years trying to get her to develop a better sense of humor. She had spent 2 years trying to get him to develop better survival instincts. Neither of them had made much progress. The job itself was simple enough, or simple by Garrett Vance standards, which meant it was still deeply illegal and moderately terrifying. Gray market medical stims, 10 crates, labeled on the manifest as agricultural nutrient compounds. The stims were banned under a string of Galactic Council trade restrictions, which meant the people who needed them most, a plague colony on Ferris 9 that the Council had quietly stopped supplying, were going to go without unless someone was willing to run the risk. Garrett was always willing to run the risk, provided the credits were right. He'd been a soldier once. Earth Army, Terran Expeditionary Force. 8 years of doing what he was told and watching people with more rank make decisions with less sense. When his contract ended, he'd walked away from the uniform and into the gray space between law and conscience. He didn't miss the uniform. He missed exactly 2 things about the military: the medical coverage and the free boots. The docking clamps hit the hull with a sound like a large, unhappy bell. Garrett pulled his boots off the console, holstered his sidearm, and headed down the ramp. The contact was waiting near a stack of sealed crates at the far end of the bay. A thin Draneth male with green-gray scales, and a jacket that was 2 sizes too large. As if he'd bought it for a version of himself that was more confident and better fed. His hands kept moving, fingers working against each other like he was trying to unknot something invisible. "You are late," the Draneth said. "I'm operating on Terran Standard Time," Garrett said. "It runs about 20 minutes behind everyone else's clock." He scanned the manifest on the data pad the Draneth shoved at him. 10 crates, all properly mislabeled, all accounted for. "These loaded and ready?" "Yes, but there is a problem." Garrett looked up. "Define problem." "Word got out." The Draneth's neck frills tightened. "The Morin Syndicate knows about the shipment." Garrett looked at the crates. He looked at the Draneth. He looked back at the crates, which had not improved in the last 3 seconds. "How long ago did word get out?" "Perhaps an hour. And you're telling me now?" The Draneth's frills went flat. "I was hoping you would still take the job." Garrett pulled the first crate toward the ramp. "Start loading." "We're doing this fast." They were halfway through the 3rd crate when Arya's voice came sharp and clear through the comm bead in Garrett's ear. "Garrett. Multiple heat signatures converging on your position. 6, maybe 8 contacts. Moving fast and not trying to be quiet about it." Garrett straightened up and scanned the far end of the docking bay. The wide service doors were still closed, but not for much longer, judging by the shadow movement visible in the gap at their base. "Arya, warm up the engines." "Already running." The service doors blew inward. Morin Syndicate soldiers poured through in patchwork armor, moving in a loose wedge with rifles raised. They had the kind of professional confidence that comes from usually outnumbering whoever they're shooting at. Garrett counted 8 on the initial entry, more likely coming behind. He dropped behind the crate stack, drawing his sidearm, and the firefight opened up like someone had kicked over a wasp nest made of plasma. Red bolts chewed chunks out of the deck plating. The Dranath contact made a sound like a distressed instrument and sprinted for the nearest access corridor without a word of farewell. Garrett couldn't blame him. He fired back from behind the crates, timing his shots, picking targets at the edges of the group where their attention was split. Humans were good at that, at reading the geometry of a fight, finding the seams. 8 years of actual warfare had given Garrett a calibration that these syndicate hired hands simply didn't have. He tagged the first two quickly, dropped to a new position, took a bolt on the shoulder that his jacket's weave thankfully absorbed, and was calculating his next move when a second set of boots hit the deck from the upper gantry. Not syndicate. These boots were quieter and moved differently, with the kind of practiced control that came from a different kind of training. Garrett risked a look upward. A figure in a black enforcement uniform was descending the gantry stairs at a fast, controlled pace, sidearm already up and working. Blue skin. White markings along the jawline that marked her as Thalori. Her shots were clean, disciplined, and very, very good. Galactic Council Enforcement Bureau, of course. Garrett recognized her in the same moment she recognized him, and the brief beat of mutual acknowledgement between them had the uncomfortable quality of two people who had really hoped not to run into each other at this particular party. Agent Nira Vasek, the most relentlessly competent enforcement officer the Council had seen fit to station in this sector, and the only person in the galaxy who had come close to catching Garrett more than once. "Vance," she called out, ducking behind the gantry railing as a syndicate bolt cracked the metal above her. "Vasek," he called back, popping up to fire twice and dropping a flanking thug who had been getting ideas. "You look well." "You are under arrest," she said. "Right now?" A volley of fire forced her down. She swore in Thalori, which sounded like gravel being sorted very quickly. Garrett actually knew a little Thalori, enough to recognize that what she said was creative and probably anatomically ambitious. "Maybe we table the arrest until we're not being shot at," he suggested. "I had this under control before you arrived," she said. Garrett looked at the 8 syndicate soldiers, currently trying to flank both of them from 3 directions. "Define under control." They fought separately for a while, trading cover and positions. And Garrett noticed that they kept doing this thing, where one of them would naturally shift to cover the other's blind side without discussing it. He had worked with actual trained partners who were worse at this. Vasek was precise where he was instinctive, and he was flexible where she was rigid, and together they were chewing through the syndicate numbers faster than either would have managed alone, which was an observation Garrett decided to keep to himself for now. Then the flanking group got creative. 3 of them hit the gantry from a secondary access point and caught Vasek from behind, throwing a crackling electronet that took her legs out and dropped her hard to the metal walkway. The net contracted, sending short jolts through her frame. She was fighting it, trying to reach her weapon, her jaw locked with the effort of not making any noise about the pain. Garrett had a clear path to the ramp. He had 3 crates already loaded, enough to make the delivery meaningful. The smart play was obvious. Every practical bone in his body lined up to deliver the same message. Run. Garrett was running before the thought finished forming, but he was running the wrong direction, toward the gantry. He vaulted a burned-out pallet loader, took the stairs 3 at a time, and hit the syndicate soldier running the net controller before the man had fully registered he was being charged. Garrett's elbow connected with the man's temple. His forearm followed into the man's throat. The controller hit the walkway and Garrett stomped on it hard. The net fizzled and went dark. Vasek was on her feet before Garrett had even finished catching his breath, and she looked at him with an expression that was 2 parts fury, and 1 part something she was working very hard to keep at bay. "I had it under control," she said. "You keep saying that." Garrett retrieved her sidearm from where it had slid across the grating and held it out to her. "Here. Go back to having it under control." She took the weapon. Something shifted in her expression, quick as a blink, there and gone. Then she turned toward the remaining syndicate fighters, and everything professional and precise about her snapped back into place. They worked back-to-back down the gantry and across the bay floor, the kind of coordination that shouldn't have been possible between a wanted smuggler and the officer trying to arrest him. Garrett talked while he fought because that was just what Garrett did. It wasn't bravado, exactly. It was a Terran coping mechanism that he had never bothered to unlearn. "You know," he said, dropping the last flanker with a body shot, "we could do this professionally, full partnership. Split the work evenly." You would be in a cell, Vasek said, putting two precise shots into a charging thug's knees and one into his shoulder, dropping him without killing him, which Garrett noted was a choice that took more skill than the alternative. The only reason you are not already there is because you are irritatingly difficult to contain. That, Garrett said, grinning, is the nicest thing you have ever said to me. Then Arya's voice cut through the bead, flat and urgent. Garrett, Syndicate reinforcements just docked. I'm counting 2 more shuttles. You have 90 seconds before this gets very crowded. Garrett grabbed Vasek's wrist. She resisted for exactly 1 second, read the situation, and matched his pace. They sprinted for the ramp. A Syndicate enforcer, broad as a cargo loader and carrying a plasma cannon that had no business being inside a pressurized structure, stepped out of a side corridor directly into their path. Garrett shot him twice in the knees, once in the gun hand, and they were past him before he finished falling. They hit the ramp at full speed. Arya had the hatch cycling before they reached it, and the engines were already pushing thrust. The pale Fortune tore free of the docking clamps with the grinding shriek of metal that Arya was going to complain about for days. And then they were out, punching through the station's outer clearance and into open space. In the corridor behind the cockpit, Vasek pressed him back against the bulkhead with one hand flat on his chest. Her breathing was controlled. Her eyes were not. You risked the delivery, she said. You risked your ship, you risked yourself. A beat. Why? Garrett looked at her hand on his chest, then at her face. The fury was still there, but underneath it was something that looked a lot like the thing she'd been hiding since the gantry. And Garrett Vance had not survived this long by misreading people. Because it was the right thing to do, he said. Humans have a long history of doing things that aren't strictly optimal. It's basically our whole story. Vasek held the pressure for another moment, then stepped back. Drop me at my intercept vessel. Already plotted, Arya said helpfully. I will file my report, Vasek said, straightening her uniform. You will be listed as an unconfirmed contact in an ongoing Syndicate operation. Garrett raised an eyebrow. That's a generous interpretation of tonight. It is the accurate interpretation. She met his eyes steadily. The Syndicate had agents inside the Bureau. They knew about my operation before I arrived at Vareth. Someone fed them the information. She paused, measuring him. I will need to determine who. The implications settled between them like a shift in gravity. Garrett nodded slowly. If you need an outside contractor with a flexible relationship to council jurisdiction, I know someone. I am aware. The edge of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of one. I know where to find you, Vance. Everyone does, he said. I'm very popular. The Pale Fortune came out of the Vareth system with 3 Syndicate pursuit craft on its tail and a Council enforcement ship peeling off toward the Bureau sector station. Garrett pushed the engines hard, threading the pursuit ships through a scattered wreck field left over from some old skirmish that Arya had helpfully mapped. And one by one, the pursuit craft fell back, either damaged or simply outmaneuvered. The last one broke off near the Ferris 9 approach lane, and then there was nothing ahead but stars and a colony that needed what he was carrying. The delivery took 11 minutes. A Terran medic on the ground, a woman named Colleen Marsh with tired eyes and steady hands, received the crates without ceremony and said 2 words. Thank you. Garrett didn't have a statue waiting for him anywhere. No commendation. No official record that this had happened. The Council's report would list a Syndicate raid on Vareth Station, an unconfirmed contact, and an ongoing investigation. He flew back out of Ferris 9 gravity well and pointed the Pale Fortune toward open space. No destination logged, no manifest filed. Survival probability for the last 4 hours, Arya said, was estimated at 11%. How'd we do? We appear to have succeeded. A pause. I find that statistically irritating. Garrett leaned back in the pilot's chair, boots up on the console, and let himself feel the particular quiet that came after a thing had gone right when it shouldn't have. It was his favorite feeling in the galaxy. Better than whiskey. He thought about Vasek's eyes in that corridor, the thing behind the Fury, and the way she'd said she knew where to find him. He thought about Bureau moles inside the Syndicate operation, and a Council enforcement officer who had just given a wanted smuggler a very clean walk on a very dirty night. The galaxy was strange and dangerous, and occasionally it surprised you. Arya, he said, yes, plot us something interesting. A short pause. Incoming priority signal on a secured Bureau frequency, she said, originating from the sector station. Encryption pattern matches Agent Vasek's personal comm code. Garrett looked up at the forward viewport, at the stars going long and bright against the black. He smiled. "Well," he said, sitting up straight and reaching for the comm panel, "let's see what kind of trouble we're getting into next." He opened the channel. Whatever came next, Garrett Vance was ready for it. He always was. That was the one thing the galaxy had never quite managed to take from him. He was human, and humans didn't quit. Not when it counted, not ever.